The billionaire's tip. What if a single moment, one act of kindness, could change the course of your life forever? She was just a struggling waitress with no hope, but when a mysterious billionaire leaves her an unexpected gift, everything she's known about survival, dreams, and herself is about to be challenged. But is it really his second chance? Or is there something he's not telling her? Could his offer be a way out, or the start of a dangerous game? Olivia Morales had learned the hard way to survive on her own. At 28, pregnant and alone, she had nobody left to turn to. Her parents had died in a tragic accident years ago, and her boyfriend had walked out the moment she told him about the baby. He didn't want the responsibility. So here she was, alone in the bustling streets of Chicago, working long hours at a small diner to make ends meet. She lived in a tiny apartment she could barely afford, with a constant worry gnawing at her heart about how she would manage when the baby came. Every day was a struggle. She worked endless shifts, scraping together whatever she could get by. The city that never sleeps seemed to have no mercy for someone like her. There were people with power, people who never even glanced at someone like her. She was just a speck in a vast machine that was the city, insignificant, unnoticed. But Olivia didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. Her baby needed her to stay strong, to push through the exhaustion, to endure the relentless challenges of life. She had no choice but to keep going. The diner was always busy. The early mornings brought in the regulars, the office workers stopping by for their coffee and breakfast before their long days began. Olivia had mastered the art of balancing trays, smiling through her exhaustion, and pretending the weight of the world wasn't on her shoulders. But the constant motion, the never-ending stream of orders, kept her from thinking too much. She focused on the tasks at hand, never allowing herself the luxury of rest or a moment of weakness. But today was different. Today, the diner was expecting a very important guest, a VIP that everyone was buzzing about. Julian Sterling, the billionaire real estate mogul. He was known for being ruthless, a man who built his empire with an iron fist and a cold heart. His presence alone made people straighten up, whisper, and move just a little faster. Olivia didn't care much for the rich. They lived in a world that had no place for people like her. They were insulated by their wealth, their power, and their privilege. She had long ago accepted that she would never be a part of that world. So when she found out she was assigned to serve him, she didn't think much of it. It was just another table, just another customer. Her shift had been long, and she was already feeling the effects of working nonstop. Her stomach churned with nausea, and she tried to ignore the dizziness that swept over her. She knew it was the pregnancy. She hadn't been eating well, and her body was starting to show signs of strain. But she had no choice. Her baby needed food, her rent needed to be paid, and her bills weren't going to pay themselves. She couldn't afford to be weak. As she approached Julian Sterling's table with a tray of food, the dizziness hit her all at once. Her vision blurred, her knees buckled, and before she could stop herself, the tray slipped from her hands and crashed to the floor. The sound of breaking dishes echoed through the diner, and the entire room went silent. Olivia's heart raced as she stared at the mess at her feet. She could feel every eye in the room on her, and the weight of their gazes made her stomach turn. She felt a hot rush of humiliation. The last thing she needed was to make a mistake in front of a VIP. Her manager, a man with little patience and even less compassion, stormed over, his face red with anger. "Olivia, are you kidding me? This is a high-profile client. How could you let this happen?" He raised his voice, not caring who heard. "If you can't do your job, then why do you even bother showing up?" The words stung. Olivia could feel the tears welling up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She couldn't let herself break down, not here, not now. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible as she crouched down to clean up the mess. But her manager didn't care. He continued to rant, his voice a harsh bark in her ears. Olivia's hands shook as she tried to gather the broken plates, the clattering sound of glass adding to her sense of failure. The other customers murmured among themselves, some offering sympathetic glances, others exchanging judgmental looks. Olivia felt like an animal in a cage, exposed and vulnerable. She had always kept her head down, never wanted to draw attention to herself. But today, the world seemed to be watching her every move. Through all of this, Julian Sterling didn't react. He didn't flinch, didn't show any emotion. He remained seated, his gaze fixed on the table in front of him, his face a mask of indifference. Olivia quickly retreated to the kitchen, her mind racing with thoughts of what had just happened. She could still feel the heat of embarrassment in her cheeks. It wasn't until later that she saw the envelope on the table where Julian had sat. At first, she thought it was just another tip, but something about it felt different. With trembling hands, she picked it up and opened it. Inside was a note, written in neat, precise handwriting. This is your tip. Use it to rest and take care of yourself. You deserve better than this. Olivia blinked, confused. That didn't sound like a typical tip. She unfolded the check inside, and her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just any tip. It was a check for an amount far more than she could have ever imagined, enough to pay off a year of rent and cover all of her medical expenses. And then the note continued, "There's a job waiting for you at my hotel as a manager if you want it." Her heart pounded in her chest. Why? Why would a billionaire offer something like this to her? She wasn't qualified to work in a hotel. She didn't have the experience. Was this a joke? Did he feel sorry for her? Or was it something else entirely? For the rest of the day, she couldn't stop thinking about the note. She turned it over and over in her mind, trying to make sense of it. She could take the job, leave the diner, leave the struggle behind. It was tempting, more than tempting. It was an opportunity she could never have imagined. But then doubt crept in. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she failed? What if this man had ulterior motives she could not see? That night, as she lay in her small apartment, staring at the check in her hands, she made up her mind. She had to take the chance. She couldn't keep going like this. The exhaustion, the fear, the constant uncertainty, it was wearing her down. The next morning, she walked into the towering skyscraper that housed Sterling Hotels, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea what to expect, but she knew one thing. This could change everything. The receptionist at the front desk gave her a curious look, but she quickly made a call. Within moments, Olivia was escorted up to Julian Sterling's office. As she stepped into the sleek, high-rise office, the vast windows offering a breathtaking view of the city, she couldn't help but feel small. She had never been in a place like this before. The polished wood, the expensive furniture, the soft hum of the air conditioning, it was all so foreign to her. And there, behind a large desk, sat Julian Sterling. His sharp gaze met hers as she entered. "You came," he said, his voice calm, almost as if he had been expecting her. Olivia swallowed hard. I don't know why I'm here," she admitted. "I don't know if I'm qualified for the job." Julian leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You don't need a qualification. You need heart. You need determination. I know what it's like to struggle alone. My grandmother raised me on her own. She worked odd jobs to support me, and I watched her work herself to the bone. No one ever helped her." Olivia blinked, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. She had never expected someone like him to understand what it was like to feel powerless. "So I help when I can," he continued. "And I believe you have what it takes to succeed. You don't give up, even when life tries to knock you down. That's what I'm looking for." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes. She hadn't expected this, not from him, not from anyone. She had spent so many years just surviving, never daring to dream of something better. But in that moment, as she looked into Julian's eyes, she realized that he wasn't offering her a job out of pity. He was offering her a chance to change her life. I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice cracking. Julian smiled, though it was small and fleeting. "You already are doing it." And in that moment, Olivia knew that her life was about to change. This wasn't just about a job. It was a new beginning, the beginning of a future she never thought possible. She was no longer just surviving. She was living.